Hello, everyone. My name is Sunil Robert, and I want to welcome you to this absolutely riveting conversation on the theme called resilience. Growing up in India and subsequently immigrating to the United States, I have crossed paths with hundreds, if not thousands, of achievers. And one question that keeps coming up in my mind is what is one factor that is common among many that defines true and sustained leadership? What constitutes sustained excellence? What is it that people take their job and purpose and align it and find something that is bigger than themselves and call it a calling and link it to the purpose of their life? The French word raison d'être means the reason for your existence. So when I grapple with these concepts, I used to think there are some people out there who really, really epitomize this notion of the reason for their existence. And when I bumped into our guest today, Benny Prasad, a few years ago, I was fascinated by his story. And I must tell you at the outset, I found a lot of similarities. For instance, his hair. I used to have hair like Benny back in the day. So I hope, Benny, your hair is protected and insured because life has a way of playing cruel jokes on our hair. But the point is, Benny's life has just been an extraordinary story. In fact, the reason we are having this conversation today is he's released a book called Unthinkable a few months ago, and that has already impacted thousands of people. As if this is not the latest chapter in his life, his story, which began about the year 2000, has just been a fascinating journey. And mark the word journey because his entire life can be captured in that particular one word journey. He's set records and he's accomplished great things in his life, which are all too well known. But today's story or focus is on two or three key themes around resilience, around risk, and around relationships. Those are the themes that I want to explore with Dr. Benny Prasad, the world record holder for having the fastest record of completing his travel to all the nations in the world, 257 in all. Welcome, Benny.
Thank you so much, Madam.
I am so fascinated with your story, but I wanted to just focus on what is it that you set upon yourself and said, hey, this is what I want to do, and this will define my life. What was that aha moment or the turning point?
For me, growing up, I was the black sheep of my family. And now the black sheep was also because I was very analytical. And I had a lot of questions. And when my questions were not answered, I just lost my interest in anything. So I just really did not have anything to dream of for many factors, including my health. And given 6 months to live medically at 16. And so my dream was to go to one country before I die. That was my ultimate goal in life with the limitations of my own journey, with my own life, with my own intellect. That's all I thought is if I can just go to one country before I die, would be the greatest dream that I could ever have. And when I sat in the aeroplane for the very first time on the 15th of August 1998, traveling from Trivandrum to Colombo,
Sri Lanka.
and that Sri Lanka was my first country, and that was excellent moment that I really took off, enjoyed every bit of that experience of the journey that I went to Colombo.
This book, Unthinkable, is an unputdownable. In fact, you should have actually considered the idea unputdownable. I finished it in a couple of hours. What I found fascinating was you did not set out to achieve a record, but somewhere this journey started taking shape. So tell us how this setback of health gave you a very modest dream of just finishing one country, sitting on a plane, Because back in those days, for a middle class family,
Yeah.
just getting onto a plane itself was a
Yes.
big dream. So, just give us the background of when did this dream take shape, saying, I want to go travel and achieve some stuff.
With the background that I shared, by 16, when the doctors gave me 6 months to live, uh, for me, everything fell apart. At that point, I was a high school dropout. I was thrown out of school just because I had too many questions, and the teachers were not interested in answering the questions. So I lost interest. So on one side, I'm a high school dropout. On the other side, the doctors had given me 6 months to live because of medical complications. And everywhere I went, I was considered a reject. And I had my own way of thinking, doing things. So I really could not have any ambition in life because of the fact that I'm going to die in 6 months. So for me, it was an encounter that I had with Jesus that transformed my life. And I'll share a bit about that a little later. But, you know, what I found at 16, at the lowest point, was the fact that God created me for a purpose. Even though I did not know my purpose, but at least knowing that in my heart gave me the strength and the reason to live and not to give up on my life or my health. So as I journeyed from 16 and I wanted to know my purpose, I wanted to give my full, I wanted to give my best. Now, in order to give my best, I need to know what is the road that I'm taking. Because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you. So I wanted to really know my path because I wanted to give my best in that, even if it meant waiting. So I joined an organization called Youth with a Mission in 1998. And by 2001, in fact, to be precise, I went back to God and I said, God, what do you want to do with my life? Because I just want to know. Because only when I'm sure of my path, I can give my best to that. Otherwise, you're constantly thinking, am I doing the right thing? No. If hurdles come, then you think that, well, this is what I should do. So 2001 was when I heard God telling me that, Betty, I want you to travel to every country by 2010. Now, this was not my dream. It was not my ambition. Nothing. In fact, within my capacity, I had about $25 a month. And with that, you can't dream of traveling to every country. So it was not at all my dream. It was just clearly a divine call. And the call was to share my story of hope, share my story from struggles to finding purpose, and also playing my musical instrument and inspiring people. So I started off my journey with that. There were setbacks, which we can talk a little later. But only in 2009, I came to know that there was something called a world record for travels. Till then, I had no idea. And I only traveled with a clear purpose to play music, to share my story, and to spread the message of hope. And by 2009, I was just short of few countries, handful of countries. By 2010, when I arrived in Pakistan, on 22nd of November 2010, I broke the world record.
Fantastic, fantastic. What fascinates me about this entire journey was it's as if you were a puppet and somebody else was pulling the strings behind you and the story was unfolding. This message of hope that you talk about would have definitely had setbacks, as you've alluded to just a few minutes ago. Talk to me about some of the biggest setbacks you faced in this journey from Sri Lanka to Pakistan, all the way in between. What were some of the big moments that your resilience was tested? What were some setbacks you faced?
No, the divine call came in 2001. And so, if I have to start my journey as a musician, uh, as a concert artist, was from 2002. So, my first country was Russia. I landed in Moscow on the 19th of February 2002. And, I'm a man of principles, where I derive my principles from the Holy Bible. And one of the factors was integrity that had to be embedded in my journey, not just in how I would talk. So when I landed in Moscow, they asked me for a bribe of $50. Now, that went against the principles that I learned from the Bible. So I refused to pay a bribe. I had the visa, I had everything, all the documents. And when I refused to pay the bribe, they detained me in the airport for 30 hours.
30 hours.
Yeah, and this was my first concert tour, and people are waiting to pick me up. And in the evening was going to be my first concert. So after 30 hours, they deported me back to India.
Wow.
So I was escorted by the police into the aircraft. And the worst, things got worse actually. And Aeroflot, those days, smoking was allowed, and that was one of the last airlines. And I had only 40% lungs. And on top of that, people are just smoking.
Exactly.
And it was a hell experience, medically, emotionally, and physically. And when I landed in Moscow, landed in Delhi, my suitcase and my guitar did not arrive. So my suitcase and guitar was already doing international trips,
Right.
whereas and it was almost like I'm stripped off. Nothing else is left. So
They just were vindictive that you
Yeah.
didn't pay.
just for the fact that, but I learned that my values um, is more important than my circumstances, and in terms of my character, in terms of the way I'm molded to taking decisions, was not influenced by circumstances, whether it is good or bad, but rather by the principles that I learned from the Bible. So the next day, God supernaturally provided the finances because, mind you, with my travels, I had very clear financial principles that I will never ask for money, will never borrow money, will never take a loan from the bank or trust the credit card. So I said, God, since this is your plan, then you have to be faithful in providing for me. That's basic requirement. When somebody tells you to do that, they should be faithful. And God provided the next day, and I started on my journey again, and finally went to London, and then went to Latvia, Sweden, Denmark, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So that was my first concert tour that I did in 2002.
Super. So, do you count Russia as a country that you visited? So, did you have to go back?
Yes, I've been there back.
Multiple
I've been
times.
back many times actually to Russia, and also the other parts of, like Chechnya or South Ossetia, all those.
So, when you went back the second time, was it like a closure for you?
Yeah, it was for me. Now, when I look back, I thank God for this experience because coming from a country like India, where we have a problem with corruption, we have a problem with integrity, and it's just like in South America or in Africa, you take these are prevalent problems. And when I talk to people, including presidents of European countries who face challenges of bowing down to the pressures of, whether it's financial or anything like that, I could stand tall and tell the world that I've never ever paid a bribe and I could still achieve this goal of doing this. Yes, there were setbacks, there was delays, denials, all kinds of things, but that did not stop me from moving forward. Yes, initially it was very tough, extremely humiliating and draining, but halfway through, I thank God for this experience because I could tell the world that the place where you are struggling was the place I was at. And God helped me to overcome. And because I overcame, I think you can also do it.
So, let's draw out a principle for our viewers. Anytime you face a setback, what are some things you did at that time? How did you comfort yourself or rebound from that situation?
I always went back to the purpose. Why am I doing this? That was very important for me. Like setbacks or visas. Like I remember, I was doing a whole continent of South America, And the only country I did not get a visa was for Venezuela. And it was so frustrating that you have every country and you're traveling all the way so far, and there's one country that's not giving you a visa. I just felt like quitting. But it always went back to the thought is why am I doing this? Am I doing this just to count the number of countries? Am I doing this for pleasure? Am I doing this just to prove myself? Or what it is? So purpose
So,
of
so
my
what was
travels.
the purpose?
My purpose was just to spread the message of hope
Oh,
that I found in Jesus Christ. And from being broken, shattered, and even if I have to share, I can tell you that, at 60, when doctors gave me 6 months to live, because of the wrong medicines that they had given from the age of 2 to the age of 16. And then school threw me out. I was a very good athlete, and that was my dream to be an Olympic champion for India. But unfortunately, at the age of 13, it was an accident that I was struck by a javelin.
javelin.
Yeah, and so I survived the javelin hit, but I had to end all my sporting dreams. So everywhere I put my hand, I went for music lessons at 15, and on the first day, the guitar teacher said, "You have no qualities of music." So all these things
Added.
added up to a point where I thought that I was born to be useless. I was the epitome of what it means to be worthless. So I wanted to kill myself. And I've done everything. It's not like I just wanted to kill myself. I tried, but I didn't fit into any box. I didn't fit into any group, whether it is a church or outside the church. Nowhere. And so when I wanted to kill myself at 16, I reached the rock bottom part of my life, tried everything. And when I heard the audible voice of Jesus Christ at a youth camp, and he said, "Benny, even though everyone calls you worthless or useless, I want you." And I said, "Why? I'm going to die in 6 months. I have no education. I have no talent. I have no future." And he said, "Benny, if you surrender your life into my hands, and I will transform you and make you a new person." And that was the turning point for me to find that purpose that God created me to do good things. He created me to be an influence and an impact to others. So that is the message that I carried everywhere I went. Is it was not like I designed the world's first guitar with drums inside when I was performing at the Olympics in Greece. But the entire idea of designing was also to portray this message that when people would be attracted to my instrument and would come and talk to me, or even when the athletes would come and talk to me, I would share this message of hope that, there was a time in my life I was considered as a worthless person. But the transforming power of Jesus Christ is what brought transformation in my life. So this is what I carried. That's why I didn't care about fame. I didn't care about money. I didn't care about luxury, even safety for that matter. I went into some of the most dangerous parts of the world just to share this message.
Super. So, listeners, there you are. If you've ever been branded a misfit, if you've ever been branded somebody as worthless or useless, remember the identity that you carry is that God made you for a purpose. You have a much larger purpose in your life. Talking about the risks you had taken, I wanted to you to share with our viewers some stories that are scary almost in from your journey. I'm sure there are many.
Mhm. I remember when I was in Afghanistan. In fact, I was in Tajikistan on my way to Kabul. And unfortunately, there was a bomb blast, and it was an attack on the Indian embassy when people died. And it so happened that there was a person from the Indian embassy in Tajikistan at my concert in Ashgabat, and he said, "Benny, please don't go. It's extremely dangerous." And I said, "But I'm going." He said, "No, I'm going to call the airlines and I'm going to cancel your ticket." I said, "You can't do that." He said, "Because if anything happens to you, there's nobody to even let the embassy shut down." And I told him, "You see, only the sick people need the doctor. So what is the point of me going to Afghanistan on a good day? Don't you think that this is the best time for me to go there, perform, and even talk about reconciliation, talk about forgiveness, talk about things? And so I did take off from Ashgabat and went to Kabul, and it was, yes, extremely dangerous at the time. And I even went to the Ministry of Culture, to the office, performed for the minister, and it just brought that sense of hope and reconciliation when everything was so grim, and especially India and Afghanistan have had a very good relationship, and this would really mar a lot of their relationships. So for me, it was extremely risky, and but I found it important that even in the midst of that, uh, safety was not my biggest concern. Again, it went back to my purpose. And my purpose went beyond safety.
Great story. In fact, what really strikes me as important in this element is if you are clear about your purpose, risk taking or being bold in the face of adversity comes naturally because you're constantly going back to why am I doing this? That's a great story. Now, tell me any other stories which involved language barriers or cultural barriers where there were some stories that I read. By the way, folks, you should get a copy of this book as soon as you're able to. There were some stories of another situation where you took a road trip and at every checkpoint you were asked for money.
Yes.
Some stuff like that. Tell us a little more about your
Yeah.
adventures.
Especially when it came to Africa, it was extremely challenging to travel uh, on the right path because
Both literally and
yeah,
metaphorically.
in both ways actually, and it was very, very tough. So I tried to fly as much as possible because your hassle at the airport is much more lesser than at the checkpost on the road. But unfortunately, when I was doing this trip to West Africa, the airline went bankrupt a week before, and I lost almost tickets worth $4,000-5,000. So now I have to go back to the original plan of going by road. And what would be a 1 hour or 2 hour flight would take you about 20 to 25 hours by road. And so I'm they call it a bush taxi, and packed with people inside, about 15 people, 17 people.
It's like the share auto and
Exactly.
share
This
in
is
India.
shared in every aspect, actually. And but one thing, hats off the way they can pack. Oh, the Africans are the masters in packing things. And we're traveling like this. And once I was traveling from Guinea-Bissau to Guinea-Conakry, and it's about 20-hour journey or so. And every 2 hours,
How are the roads?
roads are terrible,
Oh,
full of potholes.
okay.
And so I remember the driver, he would go, two wheels would be on the small footpath, and then the other two wheels will be on the road. So depending on where you're sitting, the vibration will be much more, and it's very hot, extremely hot, and your washroom breaks are dependent on the driver.
Right.
When he feels like,
He'll stop.
then he would stop. But we all learn to manage. The biggest challenge for me was not even about the weather or the food or anything. It's about, again, coming back to corruption. So every 2 hours, they would ask for a $1 bribe, the check post. And I constantly had to sit down and explain to them, no, I will not, I cannot, because it goes against my principles, against my moral values. And also, I have all the documents. I have a visa, I have vaccination certificates, I have everything. So at least 20 to 30 minutes would go each check post, convincing them that I would not give. And it went well. But finally, when I reached the 17th hour, the guy was extremely rude, the officer. And he said, if you would not pay, then we'll not let you go. And he said, look, everyone is paying. I said, but I'm not everyone. And and then he says, okay, then we'll offload you. I said, okay. And I said, okay, thinking that he'll change his mind, but he didn't. And so I had to take off my suitcase and my guitar. And he tells the taxi driver to
Take
move.
off.
And everybody is shocked. And he's going slowly. And this man is staring at me. And then finally says, "You are a stubborn guy. You will never change." And for the first time, I learned that there was a good meaning to stubbornness.
Yes, there's a positive.
So then he shouted at the taxi guy to stop. And so he stopped and he said, "Come back." So he said, "Okay, you can go." So I took my suitcase, my guitar, and I was happy because, you know, I don't even have the visa to go back to the country from where I came from. So I'm really stuck
Standard.
and in the middle of nowhere. So then going in the car and this taxi, and all the people were saying, "See, Benny, we are also Christians. But this is how the system works. You have to oil the wheels. You have to pay this $1, otherwise nothing will happen." But I said, a Christian life is not about the amount, it's about the value. And finally, we reached our last checkpost. And when the officer asked everyone in the car, they said, in fact, they were all Africans. I was the only non African there. And they said, "Officer, first you take this $1 from the Indian gentleman. If he gives, we will give. If he does not give, then we will not give." And as a result, nobody gave.
Wow.
So it was extremely risky. It was challenging. Sometimes it was just foolish. If you look from an earthly point, like for $1, why so much of fuss? But for me, character meant more than achieving a goal, actually. And running the race, you run marathon and you know that there are rules to follow. It's not just about your stamina and how well you plan your running, but if you end up cutting corners, then you just lose it. So same thing here is I didn't want to cut corners, and my values and principles were very, very important, and God honored it. Yes, in Russia, I was deported back. Whereas here, I could stand tall, and God honored it. And so there are seasons, and we all face different situations. But I believe that in the long run, you will be the head and not the tail, and that's the journey.
That's a great way of concluding that story. What I read that story and I thought you started a mini revolution like Anna Hazare, like Anna Hazare who said no to corruption back in India, and within that small group of travelers, everybody banded together and said, if he's taking a stance, let me take it. Right there, a principle emerges that if you're having a non-negotiable principle on character, everything else flows. So I was going to ask you, where did that courage come from to say, okay, it was like a staring contest with that official, and that guy blinked finally. But if it didn't, you were also prepared, like Russia, to be facing the consequences. So I think the ability to weigh the pros and cons and say the disadvantages I'm willing to ride through, this is non-negotiable. So that's risk right there for us, folks. If ever you want to take a step of faith or risk something or bet something about your purpose of life, here are some principles. Define your non-negotiable, define what you're willing to do at any cost and what you're not willing to do at any cost, and the path becomes clear. So thank you, Benny, for that little story right there. We tell us now some stories that brought you together with other people where, let's say, some humor was involved, let's say some misunderstandings were involved, let's say some touching moments were involved where you felt we are all one big global family. Tell us.
Well, if I have to start with, I'll start with Pakistan. Because the way the news portrays, the way things have been politically, India and Pakistan have really on a very bad note of relationship, and that's the perception we get, especially when you have not met many Pakistanis. So your perception is everyone is a terrorist. Now, Pakistan was my last country, and I had no way to get to this country, and and the embassy said that the only way I can get is if I have a either a blood relative or the government of Pakistan invites me. Now, I have no blood relative out of South India. And of all the places, when I went to North Korea, I was taking a lift to this hotel called Yanggakdo. It was on the 32nd floor when I came out. I met two people walking into the lift, and they happened to speak in Urdu, and we wished each other. And then they asked me, "Who are you?" So I told them, I asked them, "Who are you?" They said, "We are the official delegation of the Parliament of Pakistan." And I said, "Your country is the last country to go." So they gave us the room number and they said, "Meet us at 10 o'clock in the night." So at 10 o'clock in the night, when I checked the room number, it was diagonally opposite to the room. Now, what are the chances that you would find
A
hope?
story of 32 stories.
Yes, in the most unlikely place.
Country.
Yeah. It is like you want water to drink, and the last place you would go is to a desert, right? So, and here, when I went to the room, I felt like going to the enemy's camp because the news always portrayed these kind of things. And I performed a piece on my guitar, and when I finished playing, a man sitting next to me was Nisar Ahmad Kuro, who was the Speaker of the Parliament of Pakistan. And Mr. Nisar Ahmad Kuro said, "Benny, I will help you get your visa. Just tell me what you want." We exchanged contacts and went back to our respective countries. And you see, uh, this shows that, we have to look at humanity beyond religion, beyond politics, beyond nationality. And of all the people, he would have been the last person, being a politician, knowing what has happened. He should have helped me. But he went beyond his call, and he called up the Pakistani High Commission in Delhi, vouched for me, and I got my visa. So this gives me a completely different picture that when I look at an individual, I have to look beyond the passport, beyond the news, beyond war, because you have your own homegrown terrorists also, and you have people who are good on the other side also. And that gave me a beautiful picture. And uh, the challenging part was the visa. And I made 334 phone calls in 4 days before I met Mr. Nisara Kuro. So, I tried everything possible. So now finally I get a call to come to the embassy. Now, with all this pay, you would think that the visa would be also expensive. Yeah. So finally, when I went there, and the officer says, "Okay, your visa is ready." And I said, "How much is it?" He said, 15 rupees. Now, 15 rupees. I don't have 15 rupees in my pocket. I'm carrying the big bills thinking that it's going to be a big amount. And finally, I gave him 100 rupees or something. And he says, "We don't have change." And, it was like in the midst of all that pain, you're here laughing, saying, "Wow, the visa is just 15 rupees, but the pain is like forever." So it was a great experience going there and speaking to people, performing in Pakistan, even their own top news channel covered my news. And so it's just been a wonderful experience. On the other side, carrying my passport, right? Because I used to get one passport every year because passport contains 60 pages, and I used to travel around 60 countries on average every year or even more. So my visas are all scattered here and there, like US visa is 10 years, Canada was 9 years. And so, and when, and as a result, I have to carry all my passports, and the windows are small and it
You
doesn't
can't
fit.
get sliding.
And the officer on the other side, he says, "Why do you need to carry all these things?" And some of them would say, "Don't come as a family, come one person at a time." And yes, they would think that it's a whole family. And when I say, "No, this is one passport," and they are shocked. And the biggest question would be, where do you get the money to travel? If you are not earning, if you are not sponsored, so where? I would say that why do we give money the ultimate credit for things to happen in life? I believe that, we can achieve a lot of things without money being our primary decision maker. Yeah, money is important. It makes a lot of decisions in life, but I would not give money the primary decision maker. And I thank God that I could trust in Him. And He gave me this path to even carry my passport. And now, when I look at this passport with all the visas and stamps, I love my Indian passport. I remember once I was traveling to Antarctica through Atlanta, and the officer said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Sir, I have a flight to Antarctica." He says, "I've never met anyone who's been to Antarctica." So when he looked at my passport, and he was just fascinated, he was like a small kid looking at a cartoon book. He went through all these different visas and he was just enjoying. And then he closes his counter and he takes my passport, goes to all the different counters, and he
Sure.
shows off and he says, "Have you seen a passport like this? Have you seen?" That was just, you know, many times passing through an immigration can be a very scary moment. But here it was just a fun moment of seeing something like that. So I've just enjoyed this journey of travels. Yes, there are ups and downs, there are challenges. Times you faced racism, times when I saw that a person who was white was allowed to carry the guitar on board in South Africa, but just few passengers from that person I'm standing, and they didn't allow me to carry my special guitar with drums inside. They said, "If you want to get on this plane, then you have to check in your guitar." So I've seen outright racism, but these are small number of cases, but on the whole, I think that it's a great experience to travel the world. And having these bad experiences do add a little bit of spice to your travel, and it brings a lot more flavor. Otherwise, imagine if everything is Hilton. It's a boring experience, actually.
True. How did it shape you as a person? Tell us what you were at the beginning of the journey and what were some significant transformations you felt in your own mindset, in your art set? What happened?
One, I learned to be content.
Really?
Yes, my travels really brought a lot of insight into contentment. No, contentment can be subjective. If somebody wants $1 million car, and finally you give them half the price, $500,000 car. Okay, they'll say, "Well, finally, okay, I'm ready to settle." But it's not like that. Here, you just learn a completely new perspective. Now, for example, when I went to Sierra Leone, the church pastor asked me, "What can I do for you?" I said, "I just want to charge my laptop." And he said, "As soon as the power comes, you can charge your laptop." Now, coming from India, we have had power cuts, so it's not something new for me. And it was at 11 I arrived, and I waited. By 2 o'clock, I said, "When is the power coming?" He said, "Any minute." By 5 o'clock, I lost my patience. Because by now you should get your power. So I went and told the pastor, "Pastor, when is the power coming?" He said, "Any minute, Benny." Very hopeful. And he was not even sarcastic. He was very hopeful. So I said, "Okay, what time in the morning did it go?" He said, "It's been 2 months, but we are hoping that any minute the power would come."
2 months.
Yeah. But I was amazed at how hopeful he was. And yet he just moved on with things. They found ways to get things. So I said, "Oh, this is just so amazing that, uh, yeah, they can grumble, complain, talk things, but nothing is going to change. Just because you're upset, you're not going to get electricity." But I learned that you get upset, do things, talk, if you are able to make a difference. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and your emotions, and only negativity is going to
Great.
fill you in. So I've learned to be content by watching how these people function. I stayed with families everywhere I went. Only countries like North Korea, Cuba, or Maldives, see, these places where the government requires you to stay must not take. So otherwise, I stayed with families and all kinds, on the floor, on the bed, on a bench, anything for that matter. And I've learned that people with less have a warmer heart than
Mm.
people who have plenty. And They just don't know how to even be hospitable. Now, booking a hotel for somebody can seem to be generous, but not necessarily hospitable. Hospitality is something that what is your sacrifice? What is your effort? I've seen that when you would give up your bed for someone to come and stay for 2 or 3 days, there's a greater degree of sacrifice compared to taking some of your money and splashing it in a hotel and say, yes, in terms of comfort, you are at comfort, they are at comfort, but in terms of sacrifice, nothing.
Yeah.
So I've learned that in my travels, that staying with families, you can see how much sacrificial they've been, and that builds up the warmth. That kept me going on. Traveling is a very lonely experience. One of the biggest challenges to be a solo traveler is loneliness, and it's very, very hard when you're traveling and coming from a warm climate like India, where you are attached to people, you're always with people, and I'm an extrovert in that way. What kept me going with my travels is staying with families, and I enjoyed my relationship with people, and that relationship is what fueled me with the strength to keep moving and knowing that, okay, I'm going to another country now, I'm going to Tunisia. And all these people are new people. I've never met them. And those days there was no video calls and anything else, everything through email.
Email.
So they don't even know. And even for you to send your photograph, it's a big deal because you are using dial up. It will take forever to download a photograph. So they don't know who I am in terms of how I look, what it is, what is my take. But this relationship, this bond kept me going from one country to another country to another country. And I can tell you that the number of countries that I've traveled to, 257 countries, not even once. I was at the early stage of burnout, not even once.
Mm. Fascinating. We covered resilience, we covered relationships, we also touched about risk. What's your advice to, let's say, young people that are either depressed, anxious about the future? What is it that they need to sort of practically start doing in order to sort of get a grip on what their situation is and the path forward?
First thing I would say is stop being entitled.
Mm.
When you are entitled, then you think that I deserve this. And that is a big challenge. I deserve the latest guitar. No, start with what you
Okay.
have, not what you think that you deserve. And that is a big challenge I've seen, especially in the Western world or in an affluent nation, is there is a lot of entitlement. And as a result, there is no risk. There is no surprises. There is no hardship. And see, if you don't have hardship, there's no surprises. It's just the boring thing. That's why they pick up a nice guitar and within 2 months they give up. I love to shop in America because, especially, I love to shop used things because their used things are
As good as
as good as new. Like once I bought a phone, and this guy was selling it. He said it's a brand new phone. I've only used it for one day. I said, why did you buy it? He said, well, I thought I would like it, but after one day, I didn't like it. So I'm saying, you know, this is like shocking. How can you do something like this? So I I've seen that this spirit of entitlement needs to be broken. And it would be good for you to break it rather than allowing circumstances to break that.
Mm.
And secondly, is learn contentment. No, just ask your family, your grandfather, your great grandfather, how did you start your journey? From where did you come? Where did you get all these things? And that will help you to see that there was a journey, there was a thread of progress that has happened.
Mm.
Like my father grew up in a remote village in Andhra Pradesh in South India, where there was no electricity. and now he's an aerospace scientist. Now, when I asked my father, how did the journey start from there to there, it just gives me so much to be thankful, so much to be content, so much to be grateful. And if we all can look at the history of where our family started off, I believe that will give you a beautiful perspective to life. And even when you don't have the things that you desire for, you will be grateful and thankful for what you already have. And the last thing I would say is stop comparing yourself. Comparison will steal the joy of your life. I'll tell you the story for me was in Singapore actually, 2003. I was graduating from the University of the Nations. And at the graduation, I was the most traveled graduate of all the graduates. So it was about 15 countries or so. I was just so proud and I was thankful, but on the whole, that I was just,
You're feeling good.
yes, I was feeling really good that of all the nationalities there, I was the most traveled. And they would read out the number of countries you've been to, and then they'd look here. It was all good. And then we were walking down the aisle after graduation. An unknown guy comes to me and he says, Benny, it's so wonderful that you have traveled the world. I said, yes, I've traveled all over the world. And then he asked me, have you been to Tibet? I said, yes. And then he says, yeah, that's wonderful. So now, with an attitude, I asked him, so what about you? Do you travel? He said, yeah, I travel a bit. I said, okay, so how many countries? He said, only 75. Oh my goodness. I couldn't eat my graduation dinner. I was just so upset. I was just like, what a fool I am. You see, instead of being
Embarrassed.
grateful
Got
for
the
the
situation.
15 countries that God took me, I compared myself to an unknown person and lost the joy of celebration. So that's what I would say is that stop comparing yourself and be content where you are at and be thankful, and that will give you a beautiful sense of being grateful, being thankful, being purposeful, and you will enjoy your life and will become an adventure.
So there you are, folks. He offered three principles. First is stop this entitlement mindset. Second, define your ongoing sense of
That is basically looking at your father, great grandfather, great this
roots. Go back to your roots. Find your parents and grandparents' story. And finally, develop contentment out of comparison. Just get away from a comparative mindset and comparing, always competing with others. Find your own inner rhythm. As a musician, I'm sure you've the invention of the bentar was a big part, and we are coming wrapping up. We are wrapping up towards the end. I wanted to just ask you, what really keeps you going now that a big dream has been accomplished? What next? Do you now fully spend your time just spreading this message of hope, or are there more milestones? Like, do you ever think, should I be thinking of going into space, for example? But what keeps you going, Benny, and what are your future things we should be thinking of?
Well, talking about space and Mars and other things, people did talk to me about that, but I said that my whole purpose is to spread the message of hope, and since there's no people there, I don't want to go. And I didn't go to Antarctica, but I did perform for the scientists and the geologists and those people. So there was a purpose to do with humans. Now, I've taken a backseat with my music. I've reached the peak. I was doing really well, doing about 300 concerts a year. But when I finished traveling to every country, South Sudan was my last country. It was 6 days old, 2011. After that, there's been no new countries.
No countries.
I went back, sat down to analyze and check and ask God, what is your purpose? Went back to the same question is what do you want to do? Since I've traveled to every country in the world, now what is next? And that is when God gave me this vision to build a 400-seater cafe in Bangalore called Chai 316, CHAI 316. And this is not a commercial cafe. It's a cafe to interact with people. It's a cafe built on conversations and to work in the area of mental health. And we have one of the highest rates of suicides in India. And
Bangalore is called the
Bangalore, yeah,
suicide
suicide
capital
capital
of
of India. As much as it's the Silicon Valley of India, it's also the suicide capital. And so God gave this beautiful idea to invest all my savings in building a beautiful state of the art cafe where we only serve chai. And the price of the tea or chai is dependent on people who walk in. And our goal is 80% listening and 20% talking. And now it's been 10 years. On average, every week we rescue at least one young boy or a girl who's on the verge of committing suicide. So for me, now my purpose has been from the musical travel part to going back to there was a time in my life when I felt worthless. Nobody wanted to hear my story. I wanted to kill myself. And here is a cafe where we are trained to listening to people. We had the longest one sitting session we had was 8 hours.
Wow.
When a depressed engineering student came at 11 in the morning and left at 7 in the evening. So that is what we're doing now is serving the community, helping them to come out of depression and suicidal tendencies.
Fantastic. I'm so impressed with that conclusive remarks that you made. Ultimately, it's not just about spreading the message to the masses and impacting nations as well, but also caring for that one individual. And what you're doing at Chai 316 is just laudable. It reminds me of my own young days when I worked as a counselor in a suicide prevention center called Sahaya.
Oh, yeah.
Sahaya in Telugu means help.
Help.
So I wish you much luck, and I just want you to keep moving onward, as they say. This conversation about resilience, risk taking, relationships, and your advice to young people has been fascinating. Any conclusive remarks or stories that you want to wrap this conversation with, saying this one particular conversation was worth this entire journey that you had? Any pivotal conversations you had with people in people? They could be high ranking officers or presidents, you met some of them, and prime ministers. What one conversation is something that you would leave with us today?
I would say that keep your values and your principles above your achievements, and because if your achievement becomes your number one target, then you're willing to compromise. But if your principles and your values become your number one goal, then the achievements take a back seat. But I believe that in the long run, God will help you. And I remember that there was a prime minister from Europe, I don't want to mention which country,
Mhm.
and we both were speaking at an event. And at the end, he came up to me and he said, Benny, I really wish I could have said the same statement. And he said that he was in Sochi for an official meeting. He was the prime minister, and they took the private plane to go there. And after the meeting, everything was done, and they had to refuel the plane. And the guy was not willing to refuel. And he said, There's no fuel. And they knew that the guy wanted a bribe. And and finally, he said that I'm very ashamed to say that, I'm embarrassed to say that we ended up bribing in order to get the fuel. And he said that, but hearing your story, that you took a stand till the very end. And for me, that was so encouraging, and it strengthened my stand, saying that now I know that the pain that I've gone through has a reason that it can impact others, even saying that I would want to take a stand
Like,
and not just fall into a trap of these things.
well, this conversation has been nothing but energizing and inspirational. Thank you, Dr. Benny Prasad Kandukuri. Let's all wish him a wonderful, wonderful journey into the seasons ahead where he will transform many, many, many young people going forward. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Yeah, God bless you.